Welcome to the Stream of Art podcast. Join me, Robyn.
And me, Michelle, as we chat openly about personal growth, creativity, and building a career in the arts. All right, hello. Welcome to another episode of the Stream of Art podcast. This is episode number 9. And today we're going to be talking about creating for yourself versus creating for commercial appeal. But as always, we'll kick it off with just a little check-in that, could potentially evolve into a 30-minute tangent. We'll see.
As they always do.
Yeah. We're on a bit more of a time crunch today, so maybe not so much, but we'll see. Time will tell. So, Robyn, how did things go this past week with the goal that you had last week of figuring out some Instagram stuff?
Yeah, so that didn't happen at all.
Okay.
So maybe I won't be going on a tangent today. That's great. But it was a good week, and so I finished the month-long challenge. I set myself a new one. So now I'm, it's another painting a day, but like slightly different parameters. I'm going to keep that going and see if I can do another month. And then after that, I'll see if I can do March as well.
Whoa.
Yeah, I know I'm getting very ambitious. But yeah, I didn't really think much more on Instagram. This kind of ties into the topic today too. I got sidetracked thinking of potential business names because I'm kind of realizing that I would rather sell my art under the name of something else versus under my own name. Like, I feel like it might be easier to kind of sell, because otherwise it feels too much like I'm selling myself or something.
Right.
And yeah, and I'm like, I wonder if I had a sort of like a name to hide behind, if that would make it easier.
Yeah, what's the idea of like having a pen name?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then I also want to, and this is all long-term stuff, like none of this is going to come to fruition for some time, but I'm also thinking along the lines of workshops and stuff as well. And I'm thinking like, I don't want to offer workshops under my own name. Like, I want it to be under something else, something bigger, something outside of myself. So I did spend quite a bit of time, like kind of just brainstorming like ideas and themes and stuff like that to try to come up with some sort of name or title or whatever. So I kind of got sidetracked from the Instagram thing, but it's still kind of like, it's in the back of my mind because it's like, if I were to eventually launch this quote unquote business, I would have to, be more active on social media. And it is interesting because I'm thinking like, I feel so uncomfortable on Instagram. I feel like I'm talking too much about myself, or like it feels like it's that I might be bugging people, or that it's kind of like invasive. I don't know. It's really uncomfortable. And I'm like, which is so weird because people choose to follow you. So if they don't like what you're posting, they'll just unfollow. Or if you're getting too annoying, they'll just stop following you. But it feels I don't like selling myself,
Yeah,
Like I don't.
That's fair.
Right. But I wouldn't have the same issues selling like a brand, which is. So yeah, there's something like psychologically going on here. And the concept of kind of operating under a name that isn't my name seems to be just more comfortable to me. And I'm already thinking there's some things on Instagram that I could do. And I'm like, yeah, this doesn't give me like the icks like it would if I was doing this under my own name.
Right.
So anyways, that's where I'm at. That's my update for the week. Yeah, how was your week? Because RPM started on Thursday,
indeed. Yeah, it's going great so far. This is the most relaxed I've ever felt during RPM month. I mean, it's still early days. So once we get into like week 3 and 4, I might be a disheveled mess. But right now, I feel pretty good. I last week had said that I was going to generate, I was thinking like 6 to 8 ideas minimum, and then pick the ones I like best. But I ended up generating 4 ideas that I'm pretty happy with. And I feel like I can hear the potential there. I just want to see where I can take them. So rather than spend any more time at this point coming up with new ideas, I'm just going to see what I can make of the ones I have in front of me. So I have 4 ideas, 2 of which were generated using like this session view in Ableton process that I use, where I had 7 different loops with 7 different instruments, and each loop was created by starting on one of the different instruments. So they're all in the same key, same tempo, same meter and all of that, same instruments obviously, but each loop is a little bit different. So I find it helps to give me some interesting sort of entryways into a song. So yeah, I've got 2 like that. And I pick the loops I like best and then sort of take those and put them into arrangement view, and I'm going to turn that into a song. And then I have 2 others that I started in arrangement view just with kind of an idea. I talked about wanting to just make some music that's a little bit more metrically interesting. You know, I want to experiment more with that. I do often like to write in like odd time signatures, but this is the first time I'm writing one in 11/8. I've never written a song in 11/8 before, but it just seemed to fit the, I was actually going to do it in 6. I was going to do 6/8. I'm like, I haven't done that in a while. It's probably not since RPM 2021 have I written a song in 6/8, which is not really odd time so much as, I guess it's just compound time. It's just not as common as like 4/4, of course. But yeah, I came up with this guitar riff and it felt like it fit better in 11. So that's going to be fun to explore. And then I have the other one I decided to put in 5, but I think I'm going to try to also have some instances where it's in 7. So I'm going to be mixing some meters a little bit, which I've done a little bit with that. Again, I have a song off of my first RPM album that is a mix of, I think it was like it alternated 5/4 and 6/4 or something. So, I've played with that before, but again, I'm trying to just make it a more regular part of my songwriting vocabulary. So, yeah, I'm excited to hear how these go. So my sort of hope is that by the end of next week, I'll have a good idea as to whether they're viable. Right. And then from there, I can do another couple of ideas if I feel like I need. But I don't know. I feel like there's magic in the month of February. There's something about RPM. They just pull stuff out of me that I just can't even explain. So I feel like I'll be able to make all of these work, in some way, shape, or form. It's really going to come down to whether they fit with the themes that I'm going for. So one other thing I did was I got this new journal, and it's going to be what I use for the next 3 years, the next 3 RPMs for this full Stoic album project. And I wrote out, it's probably too hard to see, but I've got all these, got this whole, this is a full page.
I don't know I was going to say, I don't know what I'm looking at, but I'm looking at a lot of words.
A lot of words, yeah. and that's really what matters. It was just a lot of words, a lot of just things for me to think about as I start thinking about the lyrics and thinking about, and this is sort of, one of the things I have to start thinking about now that I have 4 ideas is, what does this feel like it fits with in terms of the ideas? So I'm going to have to do sometimes it feels pretty obvious. So I feel like song idea 1 is going to fit with the first song, which will be about clarity. I don't know what it's going to be called or about exactly, but I feel like I can make that work for this idea. The other ones are a little bit more vague, so we'll see. But yeah, no, I'm so far I'm pretty excited. I have this one part in particular that I just cannot get out of my head. I have very big plans for this one part of this one song. I think it's going to be big. So yeah, good week.
It's kind of cool too that you're doing because I'm almost going to accuse you of cheating, but I don't mean it. But it is interesting, because some of this stuff that you're doing now might come into play next year. So, because if you're doing kind of because it's kind of going on the same, there's an overarching theme to the next 3 years, right? Yeah. So that's kind of cool too, to be able to this time next year reflect back, and you might be able to pull some stuff that you thought of this
100%. Yes.
Which isn't that a little bit cheaty, Michelle?
No, I wouldn't call it cheating.
Okay, good.
I don't think of it as cheating.
I'm just trying to throw you under the bus.
I see how it is. That's fair, but you're gonna have to try to throw me under a different bus, because this bus it's long gone. There's no cheating. Didn't even exist. It's a ghost bus. No, because actually technically, I mean, you could argue that I've cheated for all of my RPM albums in the sense that I had something in mind before I started them. And really,
it's impossible not to. So I guess in the spirit of the challenge, you're only working on the thing during that month. But like, how do you not, like, if you know you're going to do it, how do you not subconsciously think up things? And
and the thing is too, it feels like way more open now too. So actually with this year's challenge specifically, I noticed that they were encouraging people to finish stuff they started. Like it's more, it's more now. Yeah, it's more now. And I love this idea because I think it's much more inclusive to the people who just don't have the time like I do to like dedicate a whole month to making something from start to scratch or to start to finish. You know, so people who maybe have something they've started that they want to finish, now is a good time to get it done. And I know some people who have done that the last few years, and it's great. It's sort of like that's the time they give themselves every year to get something finished, which I think we've talked about how important that is to create something and see it all the way through to the end. You learn so much from that process. And so knowing that there's a whole bunch of other people doing that is just this great incentive for other people to do it as well. So yeah, some people are just finishing stuff that already exists. Or like in my case, I like to do something new, but I think part of that is also because I'm already in the middle of something. Like I've been working on this full-length album for a few years now, and I know there's no hope of me finishing it in a month. Partly just because I know how much there is still to do and because I don't want to rush through the process or feel rushed through the process. And also I know in order for me to get that album fully finished, there are a lot of other people that I have to get involved and I'm going to need help. So I know it's like my expectations for this album will be to have it finished within the next 2 to 3 years. So I like having something that is just designated for this 1 month in the year. And I love using it as a way to challenge myself. So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely for myself, I like to give myself like the challenge of starting the music on February 1st and getting it finished to some level of completion anyways by the end of the month. But no, I definitely think about it. And like I remember my first RPM, it was a little bit more loose. It was just this sort of idea, like I think I'm going to give myself a theme. I think it's going to be winter. That might be helpful. And then I found it really helpful. So I've sort of maintained that trend each year of having some kind of a theme. So I definitely, I'm not averse to for the purposes of this challenge I give myself, I'm not averse to having some time ahead to think because, I'm not actually sitting down and doing the brunt of the work. That's all February. I also wouldn't want to do any more. I like that it's just the 1 month. If it was leaking into January and, or before, I don't think I'd want to do it. I like that it's just 1 month out of my year.
Yeah. And like working within time constraints, I think is an interesting experience. And like that, I mean, we talked about this before, like that can create that, like having a time constraint can actually create some really interesting things.
Yeah. So speaking of constraints, we can think about creating for commercial appeal as a constraint.
It's really interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. And this is where it would be really useful to have some other artists on this with us, because I'm just kind of curious, like for those artists who have become commercially successful, and by that I mean are able to sustain themselves off of selling their art, do they create for themselves or are they creating for an audience? Or have they, they're creating for themselves and then through that have found an audience. And so now they're creating for themselves and for an audience because the people who follow them or buy their work just love their work. Like, I don't know. I don't think there's any one answer, I suppose.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But like, it's a question that comes up a lot in my mind because I do, like my abstract stuff is very much about me. Like I'm creating, there's something that I'm trying to express or there's like an energy I'm trying to get out of me and onto the canvas. Whereas, my representational work is much more about painting for someone. Because, I mean, typically, like, I'm painting representationally when I'm getting commissions. And so, of course, like, that's not about painting for me. You're painting something for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of like, I go back and forth. It's like, what avenue would be financially more viable? And then, tied up in that is like, if you're, because there is this kind of, I think there is a desire when people buy art. I think there's a desire around buying a piece of the artist. Like
right.
You're buying. So if you're painting, if you're not painting from that place within yourself, does that mean that your work is less valuable? Like if you're painting for, it's like, I'm painting this not really because it's coming, I'm not trying to express anything. It's not coming from within me. It's just this person wants this photo recreated as a painting. Like, is that somehow less kind of glamorous? Does it actually matter? But what was I listening to recently? Oh man, it was a podcast episode. I can't remember.
Was it? Well, in the podcast episode that you had suggested, the one that we were just talking about before we started recording, the guest was talking about people's preference for art and having it like come from the artist versus like somebody copying.
Yeah.
That's what that was making me think of.
Yeah. That's what I was getting at. So in that podcast, do you remember what the outcome was? Like, did they say, because they tried to do a study, like, and did they say there was people who had a preference for the art that was done by the artist?
Yeah, I think that's what Yeah, so I think there was like 3 different scenarios. So it was like a painting, the original painting by the artist, a copy of the painting by the artist's assistant, and they had explained to the people that this is like ethical, it's done all through the art world, whatever. And then there was a third option. It was like a knockoff,
forgery,
I guess. Yeah, exactly. And so people didn't like the forgery, and they were better with the one that was like copied. That was like an exact copy. It has the name of the artist and everything, but they preferred the one by the artist. And what the guest was talking about was, having like knowing there's something sort of spiritual, like knowing that person touched it, that it was their intention, it was them. And so I think that's exactly like what you're getting at, like having a piece of the artist, like that's meaningful beyond just the piece of art and what it inspires in somebody. It's like just that extra thing, like knowing where it came from.
Yeah, that was a really interesting, for anyone who's interested in checking it out, it was called...
Yeah, it's the podcast Speaking of Psychology. The episode was What Psychology Has to Say About Art with Ellen Winner, PhD. So yeah, I'll add a link to that episode in the show notes if anybody wants to check it out. It was definitely very interesting.
Yeah, and I can relate because I'm thinking, like, for me personally, like, would I rather have the thing that was done by the artist, or would I rather pay less and have, well, I mean, I don't even know if pay was part of it, but like, I think
the copy by the assistant was the same. Yeah.
Yeah, it was valued at the same. Right. That's right. So you would, right. And would I rather have the one done by the artist or the one done by the assistants? It's no difference. Everything is exactly the same. And it's still, yes, I would choose the one done by the artist, because to me that feels more real or something.
Yeah.
And there is that kind of like, there's something about it that feels more, even though those like who are the assistants, like they're also artists.
Yeah.
Right?
You have to be pretty good to paint something exactly.
Right. So when you get something from them, you're also getting something from like an artist, a real artist. But it's that kind of like, but you're not getting it from that person's mind. You're getting it like that's something that they recreated, but the root of the idea or whatever was from someone else's mind. Yeah, for the artists who they found their audience, and like for those who they've painted for themselves, and then through that they've found an audience, and through that they're now able to sell their work and support themselves. I kind of wonder if there's a point in time where you stop creating for yourself and now you are creating for an audience, because you can't like, whether you ever get to a point where you feel so tied to this way of creating or this kind of visual aesthetic because of the fact that you have an audience, and to deviate would be to sacrifice your livelihood. So like being a professional artist is there just a natural progression where at some point you are now creating for an audience versus creating for yourself? And is that somehow less authentic?
That's a great question. I'm sure that is probably the general trajectory of any creative person's career, if they are able to find an audience, is that at some point, suddenly it's not just your voice in your head, it's other people's voices, whether literal in terms of their comments, or it's just what you imagine them thinking, as far as, you know, how they are accepting or not accepting of what you've created. Especially, I mean, I think this is really, you know, where it gets challenging is when you are trying to make a living off of your art beyond just somebody else's opinion, because, you know, opinions aren't going to, like, somebody's opinion about your work isn't going to determine whether or not you're able to put food on your table, you know, but getting somebody to actually purchase something you've created, to part with their money, which, you know, it's a limited resource. That's different. So, you know, I feel like there's probably such immense pressure. And like, I know there's immense pressure. I'm not experiencing this personally, but I know for the people who are out there trying to make a living from their work, there's this immense pressure to just make enough to survive, and then to hopefully keep doing what they're doing, because that's ideally what you want to do. Is you want to make money off of your work, so that first of all, you're taken care of, because you can't do your best work if you're not taken care of. And then you also want to be able to just do more work. Like that's my ultimate goal of, you know, being able to build a career as a musician, is I want to be able to make enough money so I can keep doing the things I'm doing, and doing them to a higher level, of course, because as you make more, you can invest more into what you're doing. Ideally, you can invest more time. If you're outsourcing certain tasks to other people, you can invest more time into improving your craft and all of that. So, you know, you're wanting to do all these things, but then that naturally is going to shape how you approach creating. Because if you're thinking, well, there's this thing I really feel called to do, but my audience, they're used to seeing this particular thing, you know, there's going to be so much concern about whether or not they're going to want this new thing that you put out. Because you're inevitably going to have people in your audience who are just there for the one thing they know you for, and like they don't want to see anything else. But you have to sort of take a gamble if you're really called to do something, and hope that you have enough people who just will follow you. It's like the whole 1,000 true fans thing.
Right.
Which I think is a Kevin Kelly idea, if I'm not mistaken. You know, having like your 1,000 true fans who will like buy everything you put out, who will go see every show if you're a musician or performer of some sort, you know, who will just be there for everything that you're doing and who will pay money for it. If you can have that, then you can have a good, comfortable living in a sustainable career. So, you know, it's the question then of seeing if your audience, if you have any of that in your audience. And I guess the only way you can find out is just by trying. It's just by taking that gamble. But man, if you come out on the losing side of that, you know, if you take a financial hit, for some people, it's just, well, I made less than I was hoping, but, you know, I'll bounce back. For some people, they're, you know, going to run the risk of not being able to pay bills and stuff. So that pressure is immense. And so I feel so confused by, you know, the attitude of some people regarding like people selling out. So the idea of you know, an artist maybe doing something that is more commercial or whatever. It's like you know, this idea that people, artists shouldn't want to make money, but it's like you have to. You know, you have to. There's nothing wrong with wanting to make money and wanting to receive some kind of value back for the value you're putting out in the world. You know, I think that's definitely, a mindset that's changing. And I think as artists, especially independent artists, as we're out there talking more about these things, I think it is going to just create a much more comfortable environment where we can talk about money more comfortably and you know, be able to say what we need and what we want without shame and without guilt. You know, because there is a sense of like, being, you know, guilty for like wanting to be paid for your time or your skill. And it's like, no, you should be. That's what everybody else in the world gets to do when they work a 9 to 5. They wouldn't do what they're doing for free. So, I think too, that's also something you're struggling with. It's not just the fear of putting out something that is then financially rejected by your audience. It's also then the criticism you could receive, when they maybe potentially deem you to be a sellout, which as soon as you get that sellout stamp on you too, I feel like that then is something that can, make it harder for other people to want to approach what you're doing.
It's almost like there's two different versions of art. Like there's art as a product,
mm-hmm.
and then there's art as a individual expression of internal experiences, or however you want to say it. Like there's like art for the public consumption, and then there's art for your consumption. And I think for me, the things that I find so interesting and the things that really light me up is actually work that has been created that was never meant to be seen by the public.
Mm-hmm.
So like art that is not a product. And so like I'm thinking like artists' sketchbooks and stuff like that. I would pay big money for an artist sketch like that for whatever reason, because it gives me a glimpse into the artist's like mind and way of processing and way of like thinking things and working through concepts. That to me is significantly more interesting than a finished painting that they have made for public consumption.
Mm-hmm.
And it is kind of interesting because like artists, I feel like, are kind of seen as these mythical creatures.
Yeah.
And the thing we create is sort of like there seems to be some sort of like, obviously there is something there that's very compelling to people, which is why in that podcast episode, they talk about how people were way more likely to want the thing that was definitely created by the artist. Like there's like this, the word is escaping me, but there's like a mysticism there or something that, like, and you want a piece of that artist's mind. But it's kind of weird because I feel like for those who are sustaining themselves off of their art, I think, well, again, and I can't say for sure because I haven't talked to enough artists who are professional artists who are self-sustaining, but they must think of their work as more of a product versus like this is an internal expression of my human experience. Like surely they think more of it in terms of this is a product, this is a means to an end. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but like historically speaking, that's a lot of art was a product.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you think of like all of the European art that we still revere, all of that was commissioned. So it's interesting. There's actually been kind of like a shift towards like art as something more than a product, something like that. Because I don't know when that shift would have happened, but it's interesting. These are all very half-formed thoughts, but I'm just thinking like it is interesting how right now I think like art and business, people will struggle with that concept of blending the two.
Yeah.
But go back, like I'm thinking like the Renaissance and the Baroque period, art and business, it was like artists were professional artists. Like artists were more like tradesmen than like what we consider like the modern idea of an artist is just that. It's very modern. It's very new. It's in some ways I'm like, it's kind of too bad that we're not existing. Our concept of the working artist isn't the same as it was back then, because I feel like it'd be so much easier. But there's like this idea now, and I think this is why it's hard for artists to get paid for their work or to be seen as valued or whatever. It's because it's not seen as a product the same way other things are.
Yeah, I think definitely as a society at large, I guess we'll say, devalues creative output less and less. It makes it harder for us to justify what we do to them. Not to ourselves, not to other artists, not to people who get it, but to people who don't, who see it just as, something to look at or something just to listen to. So I think having our experience with art be so removed as something that's just kind of in the background, it definitely, I think that definitely plays a part in our struggle. And yeah, I think it was really important. You know, you touched on the idea of art and business, but these days, if you want to be a professional artist and you don't want to, and I don't know what avenue you would take as like a visual artist, but if you're a musician, maybe the more like traditional route would be to go and get signed to a label if you want to put out music, which is certainly something you can do. And like for anybody who wants to go that route, I mean, you know, definitely go for it. But you know, for those of us who want to just release music independently, whether it's for, you know, somebody who wants to do this full time, or it's somebody who's just interested in just having it be a sort of part-time thing, just kind of a serious hobby, maybe, you know, if you want it to be something that brings in income, you have to become a business person. And this is something I've definitely struggled with. Because I'm very drawn just to the music. It's just been in the last really couple of years where now I'm starting to think more in terms of, well, I have to really learn about business and treat learning about business the same way I would treat learning some new musical concept. Is I have to, you know, really get my arms around it, really understand it, and really put it into practice. So I think if I can think about it in terms of, you know, learning the business side is going to help support the music side so I can keep doing the music side. That's going to really help me take that more seriously, because I think a lot of this is actually kind of just, I guess, a myth. This idea that we're like creative people are kind of like, you know, head in the clouds, and we're not, you know, not particularly savvy when it comes to this stuff. I think you can learn anything. I think we can be multiple things. And I am somebody who is like analytical and detail oriented. And I know without a doubt I can learn this stuff and do it well if I actually put in the work. But I can understand the hesitation to go that route, because I think for a lot of people, when you're creating something and it feels so pure, you're worried that it's going to muddy the waters to bring in stuff like financials and marketing and all these sort of things. It's sort of, I think some people struggle to marry those two things in a way that feels genuine, that feels like you're not sabotaging what you're creating. But this is something I heard Jennifer Hale. So Jennifer Hale, the great voice actress, I listened to an interview and she talked about taking the business side very seriously. She said, if you could be an adult about those things, the child part of you gets to just play with whatever your medium is, whether it's voiceover work or it's visual art or it's music or whatever. And that's really resonated with me ever since I watched that interview, because it is the thing that will give you the freedom to go and do what you want if you're taking control and you're becoming a savvy business person.
But it's very, like, I like what you said about muddies the waters, because it can easily do that. And because like when you do any kind of like business type course, and like I did an entrepreneurial training program, and one of the things you do, like you do your market research based on your idea and stuff. But one of the things you're wanting to do is identify like where is there a gap in the market? Where is there a need? And how is your product or service going to address that need? And like that is such a weird concept to apply to art. So it's like it's a really, and I haven't quite wrapped my head around like the typical kind of business learning is so much based on like your traditional products and services.
Yeah.
Because it's like when I think about them, like what need is my art like serving? I don't really know, because it's like it's serving the same purpose as every other piece of art out there. Yeah. Of course, there'll be a niche and stuff like that, but it also makes it, because again, like I feel like kind of the modern way of creating, particularly, I'm thinking, definitely along the lines of abstract art. Like that is really, and I feel like is more often than not, like there's something internal that you're trying to express if you're creating abstract art, and not all the time, but yeah, like if you're to kind of like bring in that, like, okay, well, what is the gap in the market here? What need am I addressing? It's like you're addressing your own need through the creation of this thing. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, I don't know how to make this concept work. I don't know how to make my work fit within this like business concept. So it does confuse things. Like it can muddy the water because then you start asking the wrong questions almost. I think I've fallen into this trap where I kind of start asking the wrong questions or focusing on the wrong things. And like, it's hard because it's like, as a, if you're a business, you're wanting to focus on your customer. But as an artist, my experience as an artist, I want to focus on myself. Like in the creating of the thing, I'm focusing on myself because it's coming from something in me.
Yeah. But
that conflicts with the idea of business, where the business in business, the emphasis is on the customer and like the user experience, the customer experience. Yeah. It's not about the business owner. So there's a weird kind of clash that I haven't quite figured out how to navigate, but it's always coming to mind. And like, for me, I'm like, maybe it's just like you have two streams of offerings. Like you have like commissions. And to me, like commissions it's an easier way of sort of seeing like, how is this addressing a need? Well, it's like, well, some people want specific, like they have photos that they want made into artwork, right? It feels like there's a more obvious business link there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So having the two, and then on the other side, having stuff that I'm doing just for myself that people are welcome to purchase if it resonates, but it's less, that's more of it's a side thing, right? Like and that's the other thing I'm curious about, like how many artists kind of find their thing that sells, sticks with that, but then pursue like other things on the side, other kind of like ways of painting or whatever that we're not even privy to because that's not what they sell.
Yeah. I feel like that's probably a great way to achieve that kind of balance. I know for me, I don't feel this pressure to create for anybody else or for financial reasons or commercial appeal or whatever. Part of that is because I'm really building my career around something other than my music. Like my music's going to be part of it because of the things I talk about, because I teach, about music and self-expression and stuff like that. I like that I can share with people, like, here's my music. So I'm not just talking about music and teaching music. Like I actually put into practice the things that I talk about. Here is my musical life. Here's my musical output. You can see how this functions for me. And then, yes, for the people who like what I do, if they, down the road want to buy a CD or come and see me live, that's amazing. But I don't feel that pressure. And I don't think I ever want to put that pressure on my music. But I mean, fortunately for me, I have other avenues to establish this career. So my teaching, my eventual output. So, I've talked about wanting to do a YouTube channel for a while. That's coming soon, putting out instructional material, whether that's courses or books or something. So I feel like for me, I have a lot of potential multiple streams of income. So I feel like once I get that established, I'll be fine. I'll be fine to just make the music I want to make and without feeling that pressure. But I recognize that I'm very fortunate that I'm somebody who is just naturally that way inclined. I like doing lots of different things. And for me, that's really giving me a really rich experience with music, especially in terms of having a music career, that I get to do all these different things. And a lot of the musicians that I really look up to do that kind of thing where they have multiple streams of income. And I think that is a necessity. So I think like you're right on the money. Somebody who maybe is a musician who just wants to write music. And I know there are musicians who do this, who write their own music, but then they also like write songs for other people and sell their songs. Right. How many people out there are singing like Ed Sheeran songs that he wrote, but he has his own stuff. I mean, obviously his stuff does very well, but there are other people who do that kind of work, who move to Nashville and who become songwriters. And so they have their thing, but then they also do that. So you can definitely go that route. If all you're interested in doing is creating the thing, whatever it is, you can definitely have those two sort of sides to what you're doing. So the one that meets audience demand or commercial demand, and then the side that's like just for you. And I feel like, I'm sure for a lot of artists, that's probably gonna work. So you have the freedom of expression to just do what resonates most with you, but you're still paying your bills and keeping your audience happy and engaged. And maybe you even bring some of them along for the ride, for the other stuff you do.
Well, and I think that is what you see a lot of artists do, and I think that's why there's so many artists and musicians that teach, because that's a really good way of getting like a stable income, right? I mean, it's selling paintings is not. It's very hard to accurately predict. You just right, but with like a workshop, it's easier. It's like you set a workshop date and you open registrations, and it's like, okay, well, that's happening. Like, I know I can count on this amount of money coming in from that event. But like, with art, like I can go to a festival or whatever, and it's like, there's no guarantee I'll sell anything. It's unpredictable. Yeah. So I think it is. And I think having like I think it's smart in life generally to have different areas that you're kind of building up simultaneously or whatever, having different, like I think you don't want to rely just on one thing. It's same with the careers, right? Like, you might be really skilled in a specific kind of career area or whatever. Like, as I can't think of, like, you might be a really skilled, like, administrative staff or something, but you want to be able to pivot if you need to. And I think the same goes for business. And I think the same goes for like arts. If you are making art as a business, leaning too heavily on one stream or one like portfolio of work or whatever you want to call it, I don't even, my words are escaping me, it's kind of putting yourself at risk a little bit.
Yeah.
And I like what you're saying. Yeah. Like splitting it up. So you have the stuff you do for you. You have the stuff that has the commercial appeal or works for the audience or whatever. And that will allow you to relax a bit more, you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. So you can start to play around on the side with other things because you've got your financial stuff settled,
Yeah. Yeah, I think what you said about diversity is so true. Like, I found that just with my teaching, where teaching has been my primary source of income for, 10 years now, almost 10 years. And yeah, it's part, I mean, it's not the only reason I want to expand, but it's part of what's motivating me to like really get on that, is that there is just this sense of unease from not being able to really fully depend on the income I have coming in. So, I'll go through periods where things are great. I don't even have to think about it. And then I'll have a huge drop off. And sometimes that'll happen through like different seasons. And sometimes it's just like the luck of the draw, right? You just have a bunch of people withdraw from lessons all at the same time. And suddenly I'm not, and sometimes those spots get filled very quickly and other times they don't. So there is a level of unpredictability that I find distressing, especially as I'm getting older and I want more out of life. I'm definitely wanting to reach for more stability. And yeah, I feel like for me personally, I don't know that I'd ever want to have to turn to my songwriting to do that, like to do a different, just because I know how much time it takes for me to work on a song. I had somebody suggest to me at one point that I should write songs for other people. And I thought about it. Actually, for a while, I started writing a country song. For whatever reason, I had like a country song pop into my head. I'm like, I should write that and try to, I never went anywhere with it because it wasn't me.
Yeah.
And, maybe there's something to that. Maybe that's something I'll change my mind about someday. But I think these days, my interest in songwriting is purely for myself. So again, just to have these other avenues I can explore that for me still feel like a genuine way of adding value to the world that's like unique to me and based on my experience, my, hard-won skills and all of that. I feel like for me, I'm able to get that balance. One thing I'm really interested about though, and I don't know if we've talked about this before, but the big thing right now is for musicians is to like get your music on Spotify and specifically on like Spotify playlists, because that's where there's potential for listens. And of course, a few dollars thrown at you for however million listens you get.
Right. Yeah.
But there are like strategies you can use to make a song more appealing to, I don't know, whatever it is that determines what makes it into a Spotify playlist.
Don't get me started on this.
Yeah. So I've seen some of these videos where it's like, write a song for Spotify. I'm really curious about, and to bring it back to limitations, like creative limitations, I would love to one day try to write a song that fits those constraints just to see what I could come up with. To me, that seems exciting if I approach it from the mentality of it being a challenge, just a creative songwriting challenge. Like, let's just see if I can do it. I don't know. I might try that one day just for fun. Not that I'm actually going to try to put it up on Spotify and get on a playlist. I might go that route, again, just to see. But it's more, I feel like those kinds of videos make me excited because I'm like, well, what would happen if I tried to write a song? I wonder what that would sound like. And can I write a song like that still feels like me?
Yeah.
And this sort of takes it back to like the creative fingerprint we talked about last week. I wonder if my fingerprint would still come through if I'm within that constraint.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I find, I have like this aversion to that idea because I find it's frustrating. And I see this with books. You'll read a book and like the pacing feels weird. Like the pacing doesn't fit the plot, and like certain sections will feel rushed, and then the ending will feel like it's wrapped up like within 2 pages, but really it should have been another 3 chapters or whatever. And it's because books are being edited specifically to be turned into movies. And so,
yeah.
And I find that stuff frustrating. It's the same with like, you're creating, so like you're basically creating a song on Spotify that will work for like a song that will be picked up by the Spotify algorithm or whatever. And you see the same thing, people making like, we've talked about this before. It might not have been on the podcast, but like, how has Instagram changed the way that artists like how has Instagram changed the way that artists paint and create? Because now you're seeing there's all sorts of like little viral video trends. And so artists will, and like artists painting, just artists filming themselves painting. Like how has that changed what they're creating? And the reason they're filming themselves is because they want to put their stuff on Instagram to like, even just like the Instagram square. I think it's less popular now, but there was a phase there where like the square format was super in. And like, I know for me, I started painting on like 8x8s, 12x12s, like a lot. I'm like, would I ever have done that if it wasn't for Instagram? And like, I get really kind of eked out by how these things start to influence what we're creating.
Yeah.
And so that's why I have this like natural aversion to that, right? Because it's like, are you stunting my creative development? Are you stunting what I'm trying to put out in the world? But on the flip side, like what you're saying, like it would be a really interesting exercise to give yourself that limitation and that structure that you're working within. That would be really, really interesting. I think it's all about like, I don't want to feel like I have to do things a certain way.
That's it.
But if it feels like I'm choosing to, then it's a whole other thing. But it would be really interesting if you'd like a series of songs too. And like, could you
Spotify songs?
Yeah. And I think that it would sound like you. I think you would find a way, but it might sound like kind of like more abbreviated version or something. It might sound.
Yeah, because a lot of my songs are because I feel I can't remember what the parameters are, but I feel like you need to have like a chorus happen by a certain point. Did you know how much I love to delay a chorus?
Right.
Do you know how often I write a song with a 1 minute plus long intro and then I have like a double verse and then you don't hear the chorus until like 3 minutes in? I love doing that. I love a slow burn. My music actually is a pretty good representation of how I approach life because I take things very slowly. And I like my music to do the same. So yeah, I'm curious, maybe that'll be my RPM project for 2027. Maybe that'll be my Spotify project, will be to try to make like 3 or 4 songs that'll like conform to like Spotify for RPM, just to see. And then the question is, can I make it something that I'm proud of? Is the constraint going to pull something new out of me, a new side of me that I didn't know was there? Or is it going to feel like I'm trying to shove myself into a box?
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing, like, again, I love RPM for that. It invites, for me, it feels like an invitation to just try something just to see what happens. So maybe we'll check back in 2027 and see if that's still something I feel pulled to try. If Spotify's even around still, then
really.
By then, I feel like it's from some of the predictions I've heard, it's not going to be around for much longer, just because of its business model.
Don't tell me that. As someone who listens to Spotify all the time.
I mean, it'll be replaced by something else inevitably. Yeah. This is just how these things work.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like, you know, the idea of creating to fit like a Spotify structure, like to me that feels like selling out.
Yeah.
But it's not. Like there's nothing wrong with doing that, because if that's what you have to do to get your songs, if you are using songwriting or music making as your income generating thing, then like there's nothing wrong with using the tools at your disposal. And like that might mean working within a specific structure. And but that would be the type of thing that we would label as selling out.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that we put that kind of like judgment or label on people too, because it just essentially what that does to artists is it just like prevents them from actually making a living.
Yeah.
You know? When you're like constantly like, oh, you're selling out. It's like, yeah, I need to pay bills. So sorry, I got to do this.
Yeah, I think it comes down to just not listening to so much to what people are saying, but trying to figure out what they mean. And usually it's, you know, a bunch of unhappy people who want to pursue these things themselves, but are too afraid to, don't have the guts to. And so when they see somebody else succeeding at it, it makes them feel bad. And the easiest thing they can say is like, which I mean, honestly, if somebody calls you a sellout, you can take it as a compliment. It's like, well, obviously I'm doing something to be recognized, to maybe be like successful enough to, you know, make a living at it. Maybe that's just what they mean is I want to be doing the thing you're doing. So yeah, that could be a whole other episode is what kind of perspective could we have on other people's opinions that'll help give us our power back, so we're not feeling like we're having to change just because we're afraid of being called something like a sellout or whatever.
And I have to own it, like, because I am guilty of doing this. I don't use the term sellout so much, but like when I see artists that like kind of follow those viral trends and stuff, like I do, there is a judgment that comes in. I'm like,
yeah.
And then it's like, but ultimately it comes down to like, they're getting their work out there. And I find it frustrating because I'm not. But the only reason I'm not is because I'm not putting my energy and effort into that. Right. So it's like, I'm criticizing them for doing the thing that I want to do, but I'm ultimately too like, well, lazy or whatever you want to call it to do it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's a pretty natural thing we do. We just have to constantly fight that instinct.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you obviously have the self-awareness to be able to recognize that. And that's really important. And then you can use that in your favor. You know, you'll know that that's where somebody else is coming from. So something I was thinking about too is creating for yourself, but still having your audience in mind, in the sense that you maybe don't want to make something that alienates them. And I'll give you an example from myself, like from when I'm making music. So I make music for myself. I'm following my instincts, my tastes. I'm using my skills, my experience to bring something into the world. But I always do have my potential audience in mind. I'm always thinking about the potential listener in terms of how I structure things. And I also try to listen to my music as a listener. So I try to listen for parts that maybe feel like they're starting to drag. So maybe something feels like it's going on too long without either something changing, or it's just going on too long in general and I have to pull it back. So, I mean, a lot of my instincts as a songwriter come from being a musical listener. So my choices are informed by my experience of listening to a wide variety of music. And so that's where that's coming from. My instinct isn't something that's just inherent within me so much as it's in me because of lots of listening, lots of practicing, lots of writing. But I do actively have that in mind. I'm always trying to think about what can I do to keep a listener engaged, and for no other reason that I want to take them on this experience. I don't want them to feel like I've wasted their time. So I think there is something to be said for still taking your audience into consideration, especially through a medium like music, where if I'm putting out an album that's, you know, anywhere from 40 minutes to, you know, sometimes more than an hour, I'm asking them to give up time that they could have spent doing something else. And so I do want to take that into consideration and try to make the best product I can. And so I'm not going to go out of my way to create something that is, you know, almost like aggressive in its inability to like conform to basic song structure, basic elements of what makes a song listenable. But I'm creating something that feels good and authentic to me as somebody who loves to listen to music. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
I'm wanting people to feel like they invested their time well. Even if they don't like what I create, I never want somebody to come away feeling angry like I've wasted their time. I want them to listen and be able to say, well, I appreciate the intention, I appreciate the craft, I appreciate the care that went into creating this, but it's just not for me. I feel like that's like the best place I could be for somebody who doesn't resonate with what I do. But I never want somebody to feel like I've deliberately like wasted their time or like I didn't care enough about them to put out the best product I could.
Yeah. I think those are really great points. And I'm trying to think, like, with my painting, like, how much do I even consider that? And I think I do, but in a different way. Because I like with painting, of course, like you're thinking like color value and like what, because there is like the human eye responds to things in certain ways. So like the human eye is drawn to contrast, like, for instance, so contrast between light and dark. So like there's things that as I'm creating, I'm thinking of, but I'm not really thinking of like, it's because music and art's different, right? Like the consumption of painting versus the consumption of music. You're listening to music for a longer period of time. You're looking at a painting for potentially 3 seconds. Yeah. So there's almost like a different weight of responsibility on the creator because like in your case, I mean, and for writers, it's the weight of responsibility is even greater because for a book, you're committing hours of time to the consumption of that thing. But it's really, really interesting point, and I think that's something I'll kind of try to think of as I continue to paint. Like, am I considering, the demand really that I'm making of the person who will be looking at this thing? Is that coming into play? Because there's something really lovely about that idea, like that you have that like care for your audience. I think that's such a nice idea.
Yeah, I think it's like the best of both worlds, where it's like I'm putting out something that feels genuine to me and it feels like what I want to create. But like I care about you too, the listener. Like there's that, you want to have that care in that relationship, So and maybe it's like having like a relationship with any kind of a person where, you want to feel free to kind of be yourself and do your own thing, but you're not like disregarding, your friend or your partner or whatever. Like there's a consideration for that other person in whatever kind of relationship you have. And so if you want like a genuine caring relationship with your audience, with your listeners, with your viewers, with, the people who purchase your art, you have to think about them. But it's when you start to shapeshift yourself into something that's not you for the sake of, especially if you're trying to go really broad and you're trying to appeal to everybody, you want to find, as Seth Godin talks about, find the people that you seek to serve. Have you read his book, This Is Marketing?
No.
I think you'd like it. I really like his thoughts about all of that and getting your work out there and sharing it. And I love that idea of just finding the people you want to serve and then, delighting them, like bringing them the best thing you can, like over delivering, really give them this incredible experience. And that's going to be what makes them want to come back. And you're going to want to keep giving them that. And you want to keep getting better, of course, for yourself, but then for them. So like each time you bring them in, you're like giving them something that's like, this is the best of me right now. And, again, even if it's something that doesn't resonate, to feel like, still feel like you tried to give them the best. And it's just like, I'll be back. I'll be back for the next one. I'm going to check out. This is just not really my thing, but I'll be back for the next one. So sort of just always making it feel like a pleasant experience, even if the end result doesn't resonate with everybody within your tribe.
What I'm realizing as you're talking is that when it comes to my artwork, I don't think I'm very customer focused or client focused or whatever you want to, I'm not there yet, which is interesting. And I think that's probably an indication that I'm still trying to figure out what I'm wanting to put out in the world. Like I think I'm still developing my art. So I think I kind of, and I don't think this is uncommon for artists, painters, drawing, whatever, photographers to start selling their work before they're quite ready. And so things get a little bit muddled. I think that's where I am. And maybe that's why it's so difficult for me to promote my work that might just be because I'm not thinking about the person who will be acquiring it. Mm-hmm. And like when you're not thinking about that person, it's very hard to market yourself.
Yeah.
You know, like if you don't have a clear sense of who that person is and what your work will be contributing to that person, how do you write marketing material for yourself, you know?
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting to recognize that. Because, you know, I was just saying, like, with a painting, like, the person consuming it is just looking at it for 5 seconds. Not necessarily. If the person is buying it and putting it in their living room, then they're looking at it every day. So there's a lot of responsibility there to consider them in the creation of this thing. Not to tailor the creation of this thing to suit that person specifically, but to consider their experience of this thing while you're making it. I haven't thought about that. And it's not something I'm very aware of. And I think there's some work that I need to do to think about that a bit more. And yeah, anyways, that's very interesting.
Yeah, with the painting too. How many of us have paintings that we got from our parents and they got those paintings from somewhere else? And, you know, a painting has potential to be like a family piece, like a piece that gets passed down.
Don't freak me out. That's terrifying.
I'm trying to bring you some perspective that'll help you tap into just how vital what you're doing is. You could be in somebody's childhood home.
Yeah. In
their child's, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I genuinely assume that most of my work will end up at like the thrift shop.
Maybe
because that idea actually makes me more comfortable than the idea of something being passed down.
Okay,
from family to family.
All right, so imagine the family who buys your painting from the thrift shop for $3.
Yeah,
$4,
and then paints over it. Just to
they just wanted to
reuse the canvas.
They're like, it's cheaper than canvas at Walmart or whatever. I don't know if that's true.
It is. I know people who do that. Yeah.
Well, and then you get to be this blank canvas for somebody else's work. That's still important. You're still contributing. See, it all still ties in. I
know. That concept does not bother me. I mean, I wouldn't want to see my own work. Like that would would hit. But like if it's happening and I'm not aware of it, I'm fine with that.
Maybe you'll get lucky. You'll end up in a chain of nursing homes or something.
Yeah.
And then one day when you're in a nursing home, you'll see one of your paintings and you'll be like, I painted that. Be like, all right, crazy lady. Time for your pills. Sure you did.
Anyways, I'm kind of out of things to say. I feel like my brain has not been very with it this morning.
Well, I was gonna say something, but you know, I didn't want to hurt your feelings.
No, it's okay.
Robyn. No, I'm joking. No, you've been fine.
Knowing that we're recording, like, you know that thing when as soon as you know that you're being recorded,
it's red light
your
syndrome,
brain just like yeah. So like my brain just like dries up on the spot. So
yeah, what you have to remember is that with my editing magic, I make us sound like geniuses. Well, that's a stretch, but I make us sound less like driveling, incoherent imbeciles.
But in this case, you're going to have to actually voice over everything I've said. So it's just going to be like you talking to yourself.
I do my best Robyn impression. I'll just try to I'm sure I can find a plugin or something that'll like just change my voice enough. I'll just like repitch it.
Yeah, just say a lot. And then you'll be good to go.
No, but I take all those out. Or I take most of them out.
Oh, right. So only you and I know how often I say
And now the rest of the world too, because I'm not taking this out.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I think that's a good place to leave it. I feel like, again, because you and I are just coming from a place where we're just starting to get into the water. Like, I like that we're talking about this stuff now because it'll be interesting to revisit this, 3 to 5 years from now, just to see how our opinions change as we actually have a little bit more skin in the game.
Yeah.
So yeah, because I have a lot of ideas, but they're very much informed more by just what I've observed and my own experiences, which are very limited in the world of like commerciality. So
yeah. Yeah, and this is something that I'm always aware of when I'm sharing my opinions on things. It's like I'm speaking from a very specific lens, it's my lens, right? So, and my experience is very limited. So,
it'd be fun someday as we meet more creative folks to have somebody else on and to talk about their experience. Maybe have a couple of people. Yeah, because I feel like there's a lot of potential for a rich conversation around this topic, because I think it's not so clear cut as either you're a starving artist or you're a really fabulously wealthy sellout. Like there's more to it. There's more nuance than that. And inviting more people into the conversation would add to that diversity of experience.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for your week ahead, do you have anything specific planned?
Oh, no, I don't. I don't have anything. I don't think I'm going to set a goal really for this week. Obviously continue the daily paintings, and I have a couple paintings here. So actually, one painting that I did during January, like during the daily painting sessions, there's something really intriguing visually about how it turned out. And so I'm actually going to try to recreate it on canvas, but I'm playing around. It's funny how things come together, right? Like I had kind of an idea maybe a year and a half ago about a series that I would call Traces. And I'm not quite sure there's something, the concept behind it isn't fully fleshed out yet, but kind of like the phrase that came to mind was like traces of experience, or like traces of people, and there was something that came to mind about kind of like topographical maps. And it's like, I don't know, there's just, anyways, but this painting that I did during the January Daily Painting Challenge, I was like, it kind of reminded me a bit about what I was sort of envisioning with this whole Traces series. And I thought, I'm going to try to recreate this on a larger scale on a canvas. So I have a canvas going here where I've built up a lot of texture. And yeah, so there's something, I feel like there might be kind of the birth of an idea. And so maybe this week I'll actually put paint to canvas, because so far I've just been like prepping the canvas by building up the texture and stuff.
Right.
So I might do that. And then of course continue the February challenge. But I love that, like when you have an idea and it's just kind of like, it's so little, it's just a spark of something, you jot it down and then it comes back in an unexpected way. Like you're reminded of it without even really trying. It just like you do something that kind of like re-sparks that idea. And then it's like, oh wait, I know where I can go with this now. And it just makes me always feel like there's a greater, like there's like there must be something that there's a greater plan, like there's something at play here.
Yeah.
Like you feel like this can't just be a coincidence. Like there must be.
Yeah. I love seeds that become bigger plans. Yeah. And you don't, sometimes that there's value in this idea. You just don't know when. And then when it comes back into play, you're like, yes. It's like when you're watching a movie or a show or something and something pops up and you're like, I feel like I need to remember that. And then they bring it back. Yeah. Something was foreshadowed and you're like, I knew it. It's like that. But I get that. I get that with songwriting as well. I just had I don't think I've talked about this yet, but I had this one seed of an idea. It was a lyric and a melody, and then like the next part of the melody, and I just couldn't seem to find a lyric for it. I felt like there was something there. I came up with this idea in like 2018, and it just kept sort of popping up in the back of my mind. I'm like, and I would sit down and try to work on it, but
nothing.
Yeah. Did I talk about this already?
No.
Okay. Yeah.
Or maybe. No, I don't know.
So no, I kept trying to come back to it and just wasn't working, but it was enough. It was interesting enough to me that I knew I just needed to keep coming back. And And when I got the idea for my full-length album, I thought, oh, maybe this could turn into the title track, but it just didn't work. But and then I ended up writing the title track in September with something totally different. I'm like, oh, it fits way better. But this idea was still there. And then I had the thought, oh, I could actually turn that one idea. I can finish it. It doesn't have to be a full song. It can be like 3 different tracks, like little interstitial tracks. So it would be like each about a minute in length that sort of split up the album. So if you've ever heard an album that does that, maybe like the intro track is like, it's an introduction and, you know, maybe it's mostly instrumental. And so I'm going to do that. And like, you'll have like those things pop up through the album. I'm going to do that with this idea. So I actually finished it. I finished writing the lyric and I'm super happy with it. It's a little sad, but it's also like, it's good. It creates this through line throughout the whole album because it is basically a concept album.
Right.
And yeah, and this is from 2018. I didn't finish it until just January of this year when I finally got, and I'm still not finished what I'm doing is I'm building the project just as one track, and then I'm going to split it into 3 after because I'm trying to make them still make sense.
Right.
But I mean, it's like done as far as I need it to be done right now for me to justify it being a song that's on or 3 little songs on the album.
Right.
And and that was that's 6 years.
But it was
there.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because it's kind of like you're putting a piece of your own history into this, you know, like there's something that's some of my favorite when it's like the seeds of an idea for a painting come out like years later, or like when I'm looking back and it's like, oh, like I'm working through a concept here that I actually fully explore later on, you know, like when he's and I've had this experience with writing too, where you kind of have like the seed of an idea or like or just a specific scene in your mind, but nothing really goes with it, and then nothing comes of it. Mm-hmm. And then like a couple years later or whatever, all of a sudden, for whatever reason, you just like, again, like it does feel like a spark, like there's just like all of a sudden it comes to you for whatever reason. That stuff's always really fascinating to me. And I think I feel like that's kind of a unique to art making, like music making, writing, painting, like, you know, it's a very fun experience to have. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a great plan. I realized as I saw you last night, I should have had you take me up to your studio to look at your stuff you're working on. Because you've been talking about it, but I actually haven't seen any of it.
Oh, right. Oh, that would have been good.
Next time I'm there, we're all just so busy wanting to be around the dog.
Yeah.
Next time I'm there, you'll have to show me what you got going on in your studio.
Yeah, for sure. There's not a ton, but
put like an image to the stuff.
Yeah. I'll have to take a picture. Well, it's hard actually to take a picture of like the canvas that I'm working on right now, where I'm building up the texture, because texture doesn't come out in photo very well, so that's a challenge. But what I like about this idea too, like I'm gonna try to put stuff on canvas today, and if it works out, not today, this week, if it works out and this does develop into a series where I'm working on these heavily textured surfaces. What's great about that is because I have old paintings, and so I'll reuse canvases.
Yeah.
And it's nice. It's nice to, because, you know, some of my paintings that I've done before are quite textured as well. So if I'm building a textured surface, because sometimes if I'm doing like a representational stuff, I want a smooth surface, so I can't reuse the canvas.
Right.
But if I'm using a textured surface anyways, I can kind of reuse those canvases that have a bit more texture in the paint.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool. Anyways, I'm excited about that.
Nice.
And then for you, I have a guess as to what you'll be working on this week.
Yeah, I might be doing more RPM stuff.
Oh, that's surprising.
That's my life. Yeah. Shocker. February and a RPM. Come on. Yeah. That's really just it. And I said at the top of the episode, I kind of just want to see where I can get the ideas I have currently.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it. I want to come back to them and develop them and just see what happens. And then I feel like by the end of the week, by the time I talk to you next Sunday, I feel like I'm going to have a pretty good idea by that point, whether I need to generate any new ideas. And I might have already done that by that point.
Right.
But I want to give the ideas I have now a fair shake, because I feel like there's potential there. I feel like I can hear in my mind what I can do with them. So yeah, I'm excited. I like generating ideas, but I especially love developing ideas. It's one of my favorite parts of songwriting, is like once I have the spark of something that I think has potential, I love sitting down with it and then starting to build it out. And I can hear in my head just how I want it to come out. And this is a really fun thing. And then digging into like the lyric writing will be really fun too. Lyric writing, I've talked about before, is the most challenging part of songwriting for me, but it's also the most satisfying when it comes together. Like when I get a really great lyric and everything just fits, it's like the best feeling. So I'm excited to get into the lyric writing too. That also is like when it really feels like a song for me, because I write music with lyrics. Obviously, if it's instrumental, then and I've done that before, then it's fine as is. But once I have lyrics, then a song really comes to life for me. So
cool.
That'll be fun. Yeah, that's pretty much my goal. And if I'm able to, I'd really love to find a way to do like a walkthrough of my tracks. I want to see if I can like screen record and do like a voiceover and talk about like how I'm building up the tracks.
Yeah.
That I if it's something that takes me too long to figure out, I'm not going to bother, but I would love to try to do that so I can share on my YouTube channel and so I can share like on Discord.
Yeah.
Just because I love talking about songwriting and the process. I'm always so fascinated by the whole process, and I want to be able to share that. As we've talked about, I think that's something people are also really interested in, is like seeing how something comes to be. Certainly I am.
Yes.
I love seeing people break down how they create something. So that's sort of another thing on my list, is I'd like to try to find a way to do that. But it might be something I sort of do after the fact too. If I can't figure it out and it feels like too much of a hassle to do while I'm also just trying to do it, I'll maybe revisit this idea in March and do like a full walkthrough kind of thing. But I like the idea of doing it as I'm going to. But we'll see. Anyways, that's it.
Cool.
All right.
Awesome.
So thank you everyone for listening. You can send questions and comments to our email, streamofartpodcast@gmail.com. You are welcome to follow us on Instagram. We are at Stream of Art Podcast. And please consider joining our Discord group. The link is in the show notes. And just, we want it to be a community where creative people can come together and, talk about their challenges, celebrate their wins, just share ideas, collaborate maybe. We'll see where it goes as we have new members join. But feel free to join. Don't be shy. If you've never used Discord before, you'll get the hang of it really quickly. It's a pretty great platform. Otherwise, have a great week, everyone, and we will see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.